English people utilized chamber pots and discharged their garbage on London streets during the Elizabethan era. Life was not much better in the 19th century. By the 1840s, the River Thames was receiving some 150 million tons of garbage annually. As one of the most bizarre vocations in Victorian times, toshers would mine the fecal dumping ground, digging through human feces and other garbage gathered throughout the city for valuable goods. Additionally, they made a nice living doing it. As one can expect, the river and its surroundings stank tremendously in hot weather, and they drank water from the Thames. Then, a sickness killed thousands of locals. The British government finally made the decision to intervene to solve the issue when the stench and sickness became too acute. It took an engineer and his colleagues 9 years to create a system of sewers that would direct waste away from the River Thames and toward the city's outskirts. In this episode, we discuss the dirty secret of 19th century London. The Thames, which was used for drinking water, received sewage directly. Raw sewage was dumped directly into the River Thames, which runs through London and southern England, until sewer treatment systems were constructed in London in the 19th century. Even while that is repulsive on its own, it is made worse by the fact that people drank from the river. They were therefore drinking their neighbors' urine and feces in addition to drinking water. Night soil men descended into cesspools and removed waste by shoving it into wicker baskets. People utilized cesspools at their homes before civil engineer Joseph Bazalgette built what is now London's sewer system. Men who worked as day laborers would go to people's homes at night to clean their cesspools in order to earn a little more cash. The legislation mandated that they complete the task at night because venting a cesspool was too disturbing to perform during the day because of its strong odor. The waste had to be shoveled out of the cesspools, placed in a wicker basket, and rolled onto a cart by the night soil men in order to be removed. The Great Stink of 1858 was the catalyst for the city's leadership in London to take action against sewage. Londoners avoided contracting cholera in 1853 because they drank tainted water from the River Thames, but it was the Great Stink of 1858 that truly inspired them to change how they managed waste. Sewage essentially cooked and fermented itself during that summer's heat wave, and the odor became so unbearable that locals could no longer handle going about their daily lives. In order to address the issue, the British government was compelled to employ a skilled engineer. King Henry VIII, the one whose wives couldn't manage to keep their heads, enacted a law in 1531 known as the Bill of Sewers. He included instructions for the division of London into 8 sewage districts, each with an own commissioner. Each of these commissioners was in charge of ensuring the cleanliness and functionality of the sewer system in their respective regions. However, this resulted in inconsistent oversight, and commissioners allowed their problems to spread to their neighbors. Londoners in the 19th century continued to handle their sewers carelessly, which is likely why they were often drinking water that was contaminated with feces. London streets were littered with horse feces in the 1890s. It wasn't just human waste that Londoners in the 19th century had to deal with when it came to feces. In fact, strolling through the grimy, odorous alleys of London was quite an experience. There was no actual mud in the mud that covered the carriageways. It was feces. Many of it. It was primarily made of horse dung, according to Lee Jackson, author of Dirty Old London, The Victorian Fight Against Filth. In London, there were tens of thousands of working horses, which inevitably had an impact on the city's streets. Unfortunately, the Victorians never really discovered a good way to get rid of that. Simply put, their already severely contaminated water source experienced extra runoff. Thousands contracted cholera after drinking river water contaminated with sewage. Over 10,000 Londoners perished from cholera, an illness of the small intestine, in 1853 as a result of people drinking water from the River Thames, which was tainted with raw sewage. There are several symptoms, but watery diarrhea is one of the more prevalent ones. It results in severe dehydration and other negative symptoms like sunken eyes, chilly skin, a loss of skin elasticity, and wrinkles on the hands and feet if left untreated. The skin occasionally takes on a bluish hue. However, The smell was what spurred plans for a sewage treatment system in London, not vast swaths of people dying. There was a cesspool in the backyard or basement of every home. Families used cesspools at their residences to store their liquid waste and sewage in the early 19th century. These were typically located beneath the privy and were made of brick, measuring roughly 6 feet deep by 4 feet wide. They were typically found in gardens or basements of homes. When water bathrooms first appeared, they were positioned above cesspools. But the increasing water usage caused by toilets increased the surges of waste and dump and smell entering the house. At that point, people began to worry that airborne illnesses like cholera and typhoid could spread through their homes. People found treasures in London's sewers and made money looking for them. Around 200 toshers, also known as sewer hunters, would scour the early sewers of London in search of anything that had been dropped in, including metal fragments, rope, cutlery, coins, and other goods. Additionally, they would look for valuables along the River Thames's shores. Although the labor was hazardous, toshers made the equivalent of $50 per day, which, by 19th century working-class London standards, left them in a relatively comfortable position. Being aware of odd toshers was important since they knew where to look for hidden crevices and deep pockets in the sewers where the best treasure might be hidden. Toshers therefore worked in teams of 3 to 4 men, with a commander who would have been in his or her 60s to 80s. Toshers were more terrified of being bitten by rats, who were known to carry terrible diseases, than they were of suffocation and explosions. Cesspits occasionally caught fire and leaked toxic gases. In the 18th century, London saw the construction of some 100 sewers. However, cesspits, often known as cesspools, were much more typical. Around 200,000 cesspits and 360 sewers were present in the city by 1856. One of the issues with cesspits was that some of them spilled extremely combustible gases like methane and others. It was typical for them to catch fire and explode as a result, sometimes resulting in fatalities. Simply put, cesspits were not only unable to handle the volume of waste that Londoners were creating, but they also posed a risk of death from poo-related explosions. To cover the stench, lime chloride was soaked into the curtains of the Parliament. British government officials struggled to complete their work in Parliament in June 1858 because of how foul the air in the city smelled. To solve the problem, lime chloride was sprayed on the curtains on the right side of the Parliament building to mask the odor. It had no impact. Members of Parliament discussed moving their companies to Oxford or St. Albans because the stench was so bad. In order to assist mask the odor from outside, lawmakers are also known to have gone around with handkerchiefs over their noses. The price to build a sewer system was over $5 million. Following the Great Stink of 1858, the British government employed engineer Joseph Bazalgette to create a sophisticated sewer system to make London's people safer and more odor-free. Along with 1,100 miles of street sewers, Bazalgette and his team built 82 miles of sewers that run parallel to the Thames. £4.2 million, or $5.3 million, was spent on the project. The existing sewers were caught by the new super sewers, which then transported garbage to treatment facilities outside the city rather than dumping it into the river.